Hi, what is up everybody, and welcome to another video. To this video, I've been seeing a topic going around about, video games that, defined us or made us into who we are today and why they're important. And I thought that would make for an interesting topic because there's a lot of games that come to mind for me for this. Looking at that, I played a lot when I was younger, and there's a lot that comes to mind, so picking just a few were difficult, though. I did my best to narrow them down, so I'm gonna share them with you, and, these are still games that I cherish today, and I still like to play them every once in a while, and even revisiting some that I haven't for the last few years at this reminded me why they're special and why I became a fan of, say, the series or this kind of style of game. But before I get to that, I want to ask you guys this as well. What would you say are some games that defined you or that made you a gamer? Like, what made you interested in it? You can do that either, with a response or leaving your comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. With that being said, let's start off with one that doesn't really need an introduction, but has been very influential. I'm talking about Doom from id Software. Originally came out back in, I believe, 1993 for PC, and it was a big thing for shooters. It made shooters kind of a big deal. Like, yes, Wolfenstein 3D did come out beforehand, which is also a good game and also made by id Software, but Doom is the one that really brought it out there. And the other thing that really made Doom special with it was just the idea of the shareware model at the time for PCs. So what happened was you get the demo or the shareware, and that included all of episode 1, and then you could order in episode 2 and 3, and that way you get the rest of the game with it as well. Now, this was kind of a unique model at the time, and this was something a little bit different, and PC games were doing that, and it worked out well. It wasn't just for this, but it worked for other games, like, I believe, Duke Nukem 3D and even Commander Keen. But that's not really why it defined me. It was really its gameplay of it being a shooter, and just, like, how visceral it was, and just, like, what you can do with it. The shotgun is still one of my favorite weapons in that game, and Toxin Refinery in episode 1, which is the third level in it, has one of my favorite tracks in any game, and it's one of my favorite levels in almost any game too. So there's a reason episode 1 is considered a classic, but it was expanded upon with episode 4 with the ultimate Doom, I believe, called Thy Flesh Consumed, and that one was a tough one just because of triggers where you pick up something or you do something and then it triggers an enemies. But Doom to me is a classic. I could just go back and play that. And if it wasn't for Doom, we wouldn't have had other games like our Quakes or even our Call of Duties or anything of that nature. You owe all of this to Doom, and even Wolfenstein 3D for that matter. But Doom to me is one that defined me, and it's still a lot of fun even to this day. If I had to pick for the next one on this list, let's go a little bit different, and let's talk about survival horror. For me, it's Resident Evil 2. Now, if you know me or you know the channel, Resident Evil 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. It is something I play every year. It's just a classic in and of its own right, and the journey of Leon and Claire through Raccoon City in the RPD and how it expands is just memorable to me. Like, just figuring out the puzzles, how things work, how the story unfolds, the idea of the Umbrella Corporation and meeting the other characters like Ada, Sherry, even Annette, and the Chief of Police. Everything about that game was just memorable to me, and it was also one of the first games that I know that made my heart just, like, race when you saw, like, Birkin's eye out of his shoulder. Like, that really got me. And it also didn't help that when I was playing this at the time, there was a thunderstorm outside, and the thunder was really loud, so there was that to it. But just the way it played, how it moved, and the idea of just, you know, expanding the world, and made me want to go back and just do more with it, like figure out optimal routes or figure out other ways to approach things. It's a reason why I keep going back to it over and over again. And the fact that it got a remake, and the remake was actually very good, I do like it. I still prefer the original though. That to me is the best one. If you haven't played RE2, it is definitely worth it. It's a high recommendation from me, a must play, a true classic, and one that, you know, I feel kind of helped make me a gamer. Now, let's go with some things that are a little bit different. Now, one is a console game here. Yes, I know. I know RE2 is console, but I played that on PC, and that's where it was for me. But this one here I'm going to talk about next is a console game, because this was when I got a Genesis. This was the first game I got for it, and I didn't realize how great of a game it would be and how it would stick with me with all these years. Even going back to playing it reminds me of why it was awesome. And that's Gunstar Heroes. Now this came out for, like I said, for the Genesis, and it was developed by Treasure. Now Treasure you may know of with a game called Ikaruga or even Radiant Silvergun. But Gunstar Heroes was their first game, and it's a run and gun. It's a run and gun, akin to say like a Contra or even a Metal Slug. The fun fact though is I actually played Gunstar Heroes first, before actually trying out Metal Slug and Contra. Now, those two are still great games, but Gunstar is special because of how it's, like, its style, its pace, and its uniqueness with each of the characters, because, like, you have two characters you can pick from. One of them, like, being free moving while you're shooting, or the other one is you're standing still and just shooting, just like how it works in, say, Resident Evil, for example, but as a side-scroller. But the interesting things with it are just its level structure and the combinations of weapons. So you can carry two weapons with, like, two styles of weapons, whether it be a follow, a laser, like a burst shot, or a flame. But you can get two of them and you can combine them for different effects, which sometimes can break the game or make some fights, you know, easy. But it's the other thing that also was great with that game is co-op, and I had friends who would come over, like, when we were younger, and, you know, we would just run that game, like, from beginning to end. It wasn't long. It's maybe about 2 hours max. It's less than that if you know what you're doing, and I assume there's probably speedruns that can do that game in much less time. But it was just a blast to play with friends, and we would just, like, run through it beginning to end, just completing all the levels, and just trying to see, like, okay, who can get the higher scores? It was my first console game that I actually, like, owned and played in my house, and I just wish I still kept it. I wish I still kept it, but I don't have it anymore. If you haven't played Gunstar Heroes, it's definitely worth a play, especially for that soundtrack. Treasure's music is really good, and that game just proved it. But no, go play Gunstar Heroes. It's a blast. It's a fun co-op game, and another one that helped, you know, make me into enjoying games. This next one, though, is going to be kind of off the rails because I love PC. PC is where I grew up with, and it's still where I go to for my games. And PC is known, you know, for RTSs, FPSs, RPGs, especially computer RPGs. Now, I didn't get to play Baldur's Gate until later in life, like a little bit later on in time before this one. But this was built off that engine. It's Icewind Dale. Icewind Dale is an RPG, again, in the style of Baldur's Gate, where it's an isometric game, but it uses advanced D&D rules. But the interesting thing about Icewind Dale and how it worked is that you can actually create a full party of your own, and, you know, create all their characteristics and stats and what kind of classes, whereas, say, in Baldur's Gate, you only made the one character, and then that was pretty much it. Here, you can make a party, you make it to your own liking, and the story is actually built around that for it, because it takes place during the time in Icewind Dale where it's basically you're an adventuring party who becomes enlisted as a caravan guard for an expedition in Icewind Dale. But as you progress, you'll start to know that there's these strange events that are happening, and a plot that threatens all of Icewind Dale and beyond. And the story itself was really the thing that kept me going with it. But the one thing is that game was hard, and I didn't really understand how to play those games very well. And I was dying a lot and losing my party members, making new party members, starting them over from scratch. But it was just fun with it in terms of its customization, its setting, and its style of play, that it made me interested in stuff like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, or even Planescape Torment, which are also very good and classic computer RPGs. They are fun titles, and if you were to play these today, at least in those aspects, you can get enhanced editions of them available on PC, and I believe for the consoles as well. And, Baldur's Gate lived on in Baldur's Gate 3, which has been very well received and universally acclaimed. Now, I would love it personally if, say, we could see that for an Icewind Dale 3. If there was an Icewind Dale 3 of that style, sign me up day one. But Icewind Dale was my first exposure to, the computer RPG and that kind of style of gameplay, where it is kind of trial and error, where you can pause and then use your spells, and was also my first exposure to D&D. And I enjoyed it, and I would like to go back to it. Even playing it for this video was bringing back memories. If you haven't played them, they're definitely worth picking up. I would definitely suggest it for sure. Now the last one was also, again, it's a 4th entry in the franchise, and it was my first exposure to it and made me go back and look at the rest, but it made me a fan of the series ever since. Now, I do like my driving games, and you can thank that to Need for Speed. Need for Speed is a great racing franchise and has lived on all these years, but High Stakes, the 4th entry, like I said, is the one that got me into Need for Speed and got me into driving games. It's just its sense of speed and just like the feel of the cars, at least at the time, were actually pretty fun. You compare it today, it's kind of wonky how the physics work and stuff, but it does make for hilarious moments. But it was also just not only getting to drive these high-end exotic cars, but also dealing with the police and getting into chases and pursuits. That really brought a sense of tension and excitement to the events. On top of, like, not only just being as a racer, you can also play as the cops as well. And, race with your friends. Now, I didn't really do much of the online back in the day, but doing it for this video, and it's actually very easy to get it working. Very easy to get it working for the multiplayer and stuff. But doing those kind of events and just seeing that game back in action, it reminded me like why I fell in love with the series. Need for Speed High Stakes is still like a high point for me and is a great game. And all the footage you've been seeing of it with all of these, at least with this one, with all of this one specifically, has been PC. And I know it did come out on PlayStation, but I never played the PlayStation version. For me, High Stakes and Need for Speed really belonged on PC. And it wasn't only until later that I started to go mess around with the console versions. And, they're decent, I'll say that. But if you haven't played High Stakes on PC, and you only play it on PlayStation, play that PC version. That PC version is the best one. Easily. Along with another killer soundtrack.
Step away from the vehicle slowly. You are under arrest.
That's actually one thing I should mention with all of these games. Their soundtracks are great. I love the music. They all look great and they all play well. But it was really these that helped, make me a gamer and enjoy like these kind of styles of games, whether it would be your computer RPGs, your racing games, your shooters, your run and guns, your horror games. And these are franchises, and if they still live on, I still play them to this day. Like Resident Evil is still one of my favorite franchises of all time. Doom is up there, along with Quake. Need for Speed is still going, and I can't wait to see what they do next with the series. I would love to see something new for Gunstar Heroes as well. Like, maybe one day we could get that. But even I can live with that and say, with a new Metal Slug. I know they did put out a new Contra, so why can't they do another one of those? And then, like I said, if Baldur's Gate 3 can be a huge success, why can't we have an Icewind Dale 3? I feel like that would be amazing. But yeah, these are my picks. This is what I have defined me. I'd like to know what would define you. Like, what do you feel are some games that, you know, made you? Please let me know in the comments below, or even make a response to this. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot, and I thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this. So, until next time, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.
Super Retro Force.